Chapter 15 of Camille. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sophia Choi. Camille by Alexandre Dumas, Fils. Translated by Edmund Goss. Chapter 15. It was hardly an hour after Joseph and I had begun preparing for my departure when there was a violent ring at the door. "Shall I go to the door?" said Joseph. "Go," I said, asking myself who it could be at such an hour, and not daring to believe that it was Marguerite. "Sir," said Joseph, coming back to me, "it is two ladies." "It is we, Armand," cried a voice that I recognized as that of Prudence. I came out of my room. Prudence was standing looking around the place. Marguerite, seated on the sofa, was meditating. I went to her, knelt down, took her two hands, and deeply moved, said to her, "Pardon." She kissed me on the forehead and said, "This is the third time that I have forgiven you. I should be gone away tomorrow." "How can my visit change your plans? I have not come to hinder you from leaving Paris. I have come because I had no time to answer you during the day, and I did not wish to let you think that I was angry with you. Prudence didn't want me to come. She said that I might be in the way." "You in the way, Marguerite? But how?" "Well, you might have had a woman here," said Prudence, "and it would hardly have been amusing for her to see two more arrive." During this remark, Marguerite looked at me attentively. "My dear Prudence," I answered, "you do not know what you are saying." "What a nice place you've got," Prudence went on. "May we see the bedroom?" "Yes." Prudence went into the bedroom, not so much to see as to make up for the foolish thing which she had just said, but to leave Marguerite and me alone. "Why did you bring Prudence?" I asked her. "Because she was at the theatre with me, and because when I leave here I want to have someone to see me home." "Could not I do?" "Yes, but besides not wishing to put you out, I was sure that if you came as far as my door you would want to come up, and as I could not let you, I did not wish to let you go away blaming me for saying no." "And why could you not let me come up?" "Because I am watched, and the least suspicion might do me the greatest harm." "Is that really the only reason?" "If there were any other I would tell you, for we are not to have any secrets from one another now." "Come, Marguerite, I am not going to take a roundabout way of saying what I really want to say. Honestly, do you care for me a little?" "A great deal." "Then why did you deceive me? My friend, if I were the Duchess so-and-so, if I had 200,000 francs a year, and if I were your mistress and had another lover, you would have the right to ask me. But I am Mademoiselle Marguerite Gautier. I am 40,000 francs in debt. I have not a penny of my own, and I spend 100,000 francs a year. Your question becomes unnecessary and my answer useless." "You are right," I said, letting my head sink on her knees. "But I love you madly." "Well, my friend, you must either love me a little less or understand me a little better. Your letter gave me a great deal of pain. If I had been free, first of all, I would not have seen the Count the day before yesterday, or if I had, I should have come and asked your forgiveness as you ask me now, and in future I should have no other lover but you. I fancied for a moment that I might give myself that happiness for 6 months. You would not have it. You insisted on knowing the means. Well, good heavens, the means were easy enough to guess. In employing them I was making a greater sacrifice for you than you imagine. I might have said to you, I wanted 20,000 francs. You were in love with me, and you would have found them, at the risk of reproaching me for it later on. I preferred to owe you nothing. You did not understand the scruple, for such it was. Those of us who are like me, when we have any heart at all, we give a meaning and a development to words and things unknown to other women. I repeat, then, that on the part of Marguerite Gautier, the means which she used to pay her debts without asking you for money necessary for it, was a scruple by which you ought to profit without saying anything. If you had only met me today, you would be too delighted with what I promised you, and you would not question me as to what I did the day before yesterday. We are sometimes obliged to buy the satisfaction of our souls at the expenses of our bodies, and we suffer still more when afterwards that satisfaction is denied us. I listened, and I gazed at Marguerite with admiration. When I thought that this marvelous creature, whose feet I had once longed to kiss, was willing to let me take my place in her thoughts, my part in her life, and that I was not yet content with what she gave me, I asked if man's desire had indeed limits, when, satisfied as promptly as mine had been, it reached after something further. Truly, she continued, we poor creatures of chance have fantastic desire and inconceivable loves. We give ourselves for one thing, now for another. There are men who ruin themselves without obtaining the least thing from us. There are others who obtain us a bouquet of flowers. Our hearts have their caprices. It is their one distraction and their one excuse. I gave myself to you sooner than I ever did to any man, I swear to you. And do you know why? Because when you saw me spitting blood, you took my hand. Because you wept. Because you are the only human being who has ever pitied me. I am going to say a mad thing to you. I once had a little dog who looked at me with a sad look when I coughed. That is the only creature I ever loved. When he died, I cried more than when my mother died. It is true that for 12 years of her life she used to beat me. Well, I love you all at once, as much as my dog. If men knew what they can have for a tear, they would be better loved, and we should be less ruinous to them. Your letter undeceived me. It showed me that you lacked the intelligence of the heart. It did you more harm with me than anything you could possibly have done. It was jealousy, certainly, but ironical and impertinent jealousy. I was already feeling sad when I received your letter. I was looking forward to seeing you at 12, to having lunch with you, and wiping out, by seeing you, a thought which was with me incessantly, and which, before I knew you, I had no difficulty in tolerating. Then, continued Marguerite, you were the only person before whom it seemed to me from the first that I could think and speak freely. All those who come about women like me have an interest in calculating their slightest words, in thinking of the consequences of their most insignificant actions. Naturally, we have no friends. We have selfish lovers who spend their fortunes, riot on us, as they say, but their own vanity. For these people we have to be merry when they are merry, well when they want to sup, sceptics like themselves. We are not allowed to have hearts under penalty of being hooted down and of ruining our credit. We no longer belong to ourselves. We are no longer beings, but things. We stand first in their self-esteem, last in their esteem. We have women who call themselves our friends, but they are friends like Prudence, women who were once kept and who have still the costly taste that their age does not allow them to gratify. Then they become our friends, or rather, our guests at table. Their friendship is carried to the point of servility, never to that of disinterestedness. Never do they give you advice which is not lucrative. It means little enough to them that we should have 10 lovers extra, as long as they get dresses or a bracelet out of them, and that they can drive in our carriage from time to time or come to our box at the theatre. They have our last night's bouquets, and they borrow our shawls. They never render us service, however slight, without seeing that they are paid twice its value. You yourself saw when Prudence bought me the 6,000 francs that I had asked her to get from the Duke, how she borrowed 500 francs, which she never paid me back, or which she will pay me in hats, which will never be taken out of their boxes. We cannot then have, or rather I cannot have more than one possible kind of happiness, and this is, sad as I sometimes am, suffering when I always am, to find a man superior enough not to ask questions about my life, and to be the lover of my impressions rather than of my body. Such a man I found in the Duke, but the Duke is old, and old age neither protects nor consoles. I thought I could accept the life which he offered me, but what would you have? I was dying of ennui, and if one is bound to be consumed, it is well as to throw oneself into the flames as to be asphyxiated with charcoal. Then I met you, young, ardent, happy, and I tried to make you the man I had longed for in my noisy solitude. What I loved in you was not the man who was, but the man who was going to be. You do not accept the position. You reject it as unworthy of you. You are an ordinary lover. Do like the others. Pay me and say no more about it. Marguerite, tired out with this long confession, threw herself back on the sofa, and to stifle a slight cough put up her handkerchief to her lips, and from that to her eyes. "Pardon, pardon," I murmured. "I understood it all, but I wanted to have it from your own lips, my beloved Marguerite. Forget the rest, and remember only one thing, that we belong to one another, that we are young, and that we love. Marguerite, do with me as you will. I am your slave, your dog, but, in the name of heaven, tear up the letter which I wrote to you, and do not make me leave you tomorrow. It would kill me." Marguerite drew the letter from her bosom, and, handing it to me with a smile of infinite sweetness, said, "Here it is. I have brought it back." I tore the letter into fragments and kissed with tears the hand that gave it to me. At this moment Prudence reappeared. "Look here, Prudence, do you know what he wants?" said Marguerite. "He wants you to forgive him." "Precisely." "And you do?" "One has to. But he wants more than that." "What then?" "He wants to have supper with us." "And do you consent?" "What do you think?" "I think that you are two children who haven't an atom of sense between you. But I also think that I am very hungry, and that the sooner you consent the sooner we shall have supper." "Come," said Marguerite, "there is room for the three of us in my carriage. By the way," she added, turning to me, "Nanine will be gone to bed. You must open the door. Take my key and try not to lose it again." I embraced Marguerite until she was almost stifled. Thereupon Joseph entered. "Sir," he said, with an air of a man who is very well satisfied with himself, "the luggage is packed." "All of it?" "Yes, sir." "Well, then, unpack it again. I am not going." End of chapter 15. Recording by Sophia Choi.
Chapter 16 of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Camille by Alexandre Dumas. Fees. Translated by Edmund Gosse. Chapter 16. I might have told you of the beginning of this liaison in a few lines, but I wanted you to see every step by which we came, I to agree to whatever Marguerite wished, Marguerite to be unable to live apart from me. It was the day after the evening when she came to see me that I sent her Manon Lescaut. From that time, seeing that I could not change my mistress's life, I changed my own. I wished above all not to leave myself time to think over the position I had accepted, for, in spite of myself, it was a great distress to me. Thus my life, generally so calm, assumed all at once an appearance of noise and disorder. Never believe, however disinterested the love of a kept woman may be, that it will cost one nothing. Nothing is so expensive as their caprices, flowers, boxes at the theatre, suppers, days in the country, which one can never refuse to one's mistress. As I have told you, I had little money. My father was, and still is, Receiver General at sea. He has a great reputation there for loyalty, thanks to which he was able to find the security which he needed in order to attain this position. It is worth 40,000 francs a year, and during the 10 years that he has had it, he has paid off the security and put aside a dowry for my sister. My father is the most honorable man in the world. When my mother died, she left 6,000 francs a year, which he divided between my sister and myself on the very day when he received his appointment. Then, when I was 21, he added to this little income an annual allowance of 5,000 francs, assuring me that with 8,000 francs a year I might live very happily at Paris, if, in addition to this, I would make a position for myself either in law or medicine. I came to Paris, studied law, was called to the bar, and, like many other young men, put my diploma in my pocket, and let myself drift, as one so easily does in Paris. My expenses were very moderate, only I used up my year's income in 8 months, and spent the 4 summer months with my father, which practically gave me 12,000 francs a year, and, in addition, the reputation of a good son. For the rest, not a penny of debt. This, then, was my position when I made the acquaintance of Marguerite. You can well understand that, in spite of myself, my expenses soon increased. Marguerite's nature was very capricious, and, like so many women, she never regarded as a serious expense those 1,001 distractions which made up her life. So, wishing to spend as much time with me as possible, she would write to me in the morning that she would dine with me, not at home, but at some restaurant in Paris, or in the country. I would call for her, and we would dine and go on to the theatre, often having supper as well, and by the end of the evening I had spent 4 or 5 louis, which came to 2,000 or 3,000 francs a month, which reduced my year to 3 months and a half, and made it necessary for me either to go into debt or to leave Marguerite. I would have consented to anything except the latter. Forgive me if I give you all these details, but you will see that they were the cause of what was to follow. What I tell you is a true and simple story, and I leave to it all the naivete of its details, and all the simplicity of its developments. I realized then that as nothing in the world would make me forget my mistress, it was needful for me to find some way of meeting the expenses into which she drew me. Then, too, my love for her had so disturbing an influence upon me that every moment I spent away from Marguerite was like a year, and that I felt the need of consuming these moments in the fire of some sort of passion, and living them so swiftly as not to know that I was living them. I began by borrowing 5,000 or 6,000 francs on my little capital, and with this I took to gambling. Since gambling houses were destroyed, gambling goes on everywhere. Formerly, when one went to Frascati, one had the chance of making a fortune. One played against money, and if one lost, there was always the consolation of saying that one might have gained. Whereas now, except in the clubs, where there is still a certain rigor in regard to payments, one is almost certain, the moment one gains a considerable sum, not to receive it. You will readily understand why. Gambling is only likely to be carried on by young people very much in need of money and not possessing the fortune necessary for supporting the life they lead. They gamble then, and with this result, or else they gain, and then those who lose serve to pay for their horses and mistresses, which is very disagreeable. Debts are contracted. Acquaintances begun about a green table end by quarrels in which life or honor comes to grief. And though one may be an honest man, one finds oneself ruined by very honest men, whose only defect is that they have not 200,000 francs a year. I need not tell you of those who cheat at play, and how one hears one fine day of their hasty disappearance and tardy condemnation. I flung myself into this rapid, noisy, and volcanic life, which had formerly terrified me when I thought of it, and which had become for me the necessary complement of my love for Marguerite. What else could I have done? The nights that I did not spend in the Rue d'Antin, if I had spent them alone in my own room, I could not have slept. Jealousy would have kept me awake, and inflamed my blood and my thoughts, while gambling gave a new turn to the fever which would otherwise have preyed upon my heart, and fixed it upon a passion which laid hold on me in spite of myself, until the hour struck when I might go to my mistress. Then, and by this I knew the violence of my love, I left the table without a moment's hesitation, whether I was winning or losing, pitying those whom I left behind because they would not, like me, find their real happiness in leaving it. For the most of them, gambling was a necessity. For me, it was a remedy. Free of Marguerite, I should have been free of gambling. Thus, in the midst of all that, I preserved a considerable amount of self-possession. I lost only what I was able to pay, and gained only what I should have been able to lose. For the rest, chance was on my side. I made no debts, and I spent 3 times as much money as when I did not gamble. It was impossible to resist an existence which gave me an easy means of satisfying the 1,000 caprices of Marguerite. As for her, she continued to love me as much, or even more than ever. As I told you, I began by being allowed to stay only from midnight to 6 o'clock. Then I was asked sometimes to a box in the theatre. Then she sometimes came to dine with me. One morning I did not go till 8, and there came a day when I did not go till 12. But, sooner than the moral metamorphosis, a physical metamorphosis came about in Marguerite. I had taken her cure in hand, and the poor girl, seeing my aim, obeyed me in order to prove her gratitude. I had succeeded without effort or trouble in almost isolating her from her former habits. My doctor, whom I had made her meet, had told me that only rest and calm could preserve her health, so that in place of supper and sleepless nights, I succeeded in substituting a hygienic regime and regular sleep. In spite of herself, Marguerite got accustomed to this new existence, whose salutary effects she already realized. She began to spend some of her evenings at home, or, if the weather was fine, she wrapped herself in a shawl, put on a veil, and we went on foot, like 2 children, in the dim alleys of the Champs-Élysées. She would come in tired, take a light supper, and go to bed after a little music or reading, which she had never been used to do. The cough, which every time I heard it seemed to go through my chest, had almost completely disappeared. At the end of 6 weeks the Count was entirely given up, and only the Duke obliged me to conceal my liaison with Marguerite, and even he was sent away when I was there, under the pretext that she was asleep, and had given orders that she was not to be awakened. The habit or the need of seeing me which Marguerite had now contracted had this good result, that it forced me to leave the gaming table just at the moment when an adroit gambler would have left it. Settling one thing against another, I found myself in possession of some 10,000 francs, which seemed to me to be an inexhaustible capital. The time of the year when I was accustomed to join my father and sister had now arrived, and I did not go. Both of them wrote to me frequently, begging me to come. To these letters I replied as best I could, always repeating that I was quite well, and that I was not in need of money, 2 things which, I thought, would console my father for my delay in paying him my annual visit. Just then, one fine day in summer, Marguerite was awakened by the sunlight pouring into her room, and jumping out of bed, asked me if I would take her into the country for the whole day. We sent for Prudence, and all 3 set off, after Marguerite had given Nanine orders to tell the Duke that she had taken advantage of the fine day to go into the country with Madame de Verneuil. Besides the presence of Madame de Verneuil being needful on account of the old Duke, Prudence was one of those women who seem made on purpose for days in the country. With her unchanging good humour and her eternal appetite, she never left a dull moment to those whom she was with, and was perfectly happy in ordering eggs, cherries, milk, stewed rabbit, and all the rest of the traditional lunch in the country. We had now only to decide where we should go. It was once more Prudence who settled the difficulty. "Do you want to go to the real country?" she asked. "Yes." "Well, let us go to Bougival, at the Point du Jour, at Widow Arnaud's. Armand, order an open carriage." An hour and a half later we were at Widow Arnaud's. Perhaps you know the inn, which is a hotel on weekdays and a tea garden on Sundays. There is a magnificent view from the garden, which is at the height of an ordinary first floor. On the left the aqueduct of Marly closes in the horizon. On the right one looks across hill after hill. The river, almost without current at that spot, unrolls itself like a large white-watered ribbon between the plain of the Gabillons and the island of Croissy, lulled eternally by the trembling of its high poplars and the murmur of its willows. Beyond, distinct in the sunlight, rise little white houses, with red roofs and manufactories, which, at that distance, put an admirable finish to the landscape. Beyond that, Paris in the mist. As Prudence had told us, it was the real country, and, I must add, it was a real lunch. It is not only out of gratitude for the happiness I owe it, but Bougival, in spite of its horrible name, is one of the prettiest places that it is possible to imagine. I have travelled a good deal, and seen much grander things, but none more charming than this little village gaily seated at the foot of the hill which protects it. Madame Arnold asked us if we would take a boat, and Marguerite and Prudence accepted joyously. People have always associated the country with love, and they have done well. Nothing affords so fine a frame for the woman whom one loves as the blue sky, the odours, the flowers, the breeze, the shining solitude of fields or woods. However much one loves a woman, whatever confidence one may have in her, whatever certainty her past may offer us as to her future, one is always more or less jealous. If you have been in love, you must have felt the need of isolating from this world the being in whom you would live wholly. It seems as if, however indifferent she may be to her surroundings, the woman whom one loves loses something of her perfume and of her unity at the contact of men and things. As for me, I experienced that more than most. Mine was not an ordinary love. I was as much in love as an ordinary creature could be, but with Marguerite Gautier. That is to say, that at Paris, at every step, I might elbow the man who had already been her lover, or who was about to, while in the country, surrounded by people whom we had never seen, and who had no concern with us, alone with nature in the springtime of the year, that annual pardon, and shut off from the noise of the city, I could hide my love, and love without shame or fear. The courtesan disappeared little by little. I had by me a young and beautiful woman, whom I loved, and who loved me, and who was called Marguerite. The past had no more reality, and the future no more clouds. The sun shone upon my mistress as it might have shone upon the purest bride. We walked together in those charming spots which seemed to have been made on purpose to recall the verses of Lamartine or to sing the melodies of Scudo. Marguerite was dressed in white. She leaned on my arm, saying over to me again under the starry sky the words she had said to me the day before, and far off the world went on its way, without darkening with its shadow the radiant picture of our youth and love. That was the dream that the hot sun brought to me that day through the leaves of the trees, as, lying on the grass of the island on which we had landed, I let my thought wander, free from the human links that had bound it, gathering to itself every hope that came in its way. Add to this that from the place where I was I could see on the shore a charming little house of 2 stories, with a semicircular railing. Through the railing, in front of the house, a green lawn, smooth as velvet, and behind the house a little wood full of mysterious retreats, where the moss must efface each morning the pathway that had been made the day before. Climbing flowers clung about the doorway of this uninhabited house, mounting as high as the first story. I looked at the house so long that I began by thinking of it as mine, so perfectly did it embody the dream that I was dreaming. I saw Marguerite and myself there, by day in the little wood that covered the hillside, in the evening seated on the grass, and I asked myself if earthly creatures had ever been so happy as we should be. "What a pretty house!" Marguerite said to me, as she followed the direction of my gaze, and perhaps my thought. "Where?" asked Prudence. "Yonder," and Marguerite pointed to the house in question. "Ah, delicious!" replied Prudence. "Do you like it?" "Very much." "Well, tell the Duke to take it for you. He would do so, I am sure. I'll see about it if you like." Marguerite looked at me, as if to ask what I thought. My dream vanished at the last words of Prudence, and brought me back to reality so brutally that I was still stunned with the fall. Yes, an excellent idea," I stammered, not knowing what I was saying. "Well, I will arrange that," said Marguerite, freeing my hand, and interpreting my words according to her own desire. "Let us go and see if it is to let." The house was empty, and to let for 2,000 francs. "Would you be happy here?" she said to me. "Am I sure of coming here?" "And for whom else should I bury myself here, if not for you?" "Well then, Marguerite, let me take it myself." "You are mad! Not only is it unnecessary, but it would be dangerous. You know perfectly well that I have no right to accept it save from one man. Let me alone, big baby, and say nothing." "That means," said Prudence, "that when I have 2 days free I will come and spend them with you." We left the house, and started on our return to Paris, talking over the new plan. I held Marguerite in my arms, and as I got down from the carriage, I had already begun to look upon her arrangement with less critical eyes. End of chapter 16. of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Camille by Alexandre Dumas. Fees. Translated by Edmund Gosse. Chapter 17. Next day Marguerite sent me away very early, saying that the Duke was coming at an early hour, and promising to write to me the moment he went, and to make an appointment for the evening. In the course of the day I received this note: "I am going to Bougival with the Duke. Be at Prudence's tonight at 8. At the appointed hour Marguerite came to me at Madame de Verneuil's. "Well, it is all settled," she said, as she entered. "The house is taken?" asked Prudence. "Yes, he agreed at once." I did not know the Duke, but I felt ashamed of deceiving him. "But that is not all," continued Marguerite. "What else is there?" "I have been seeing about a place for Armand to stay." "In the same house?" asked Prudence, laughing. "No, at Point du Jour, where we had dinner, the Duke and I. While he was admiring the view, I asked Madame Arnould—she is called Madame Arnould, isn't she?—if there were any suitable rooms, and she showed me just the very thing, salon, anteroom, and bedroom, at 60 francs a month. The whole place was furnished in a way to divert a hypochondriac. I took it. Was I right?" I flung my arms around her neck and kissed her. "It will be charming," she continued. "You have the key of the little door, and I have promised the Duke the key of the front door, which he will not take, because he will come during the day when he comes. I think, between ourselves, that he is enchanted with a caprice which will keep me out of Paris for a time, and so silence the objections of his family. However, he has asked me how I, loving Paris as I do, could make up my mind to bury myself in the country. I told him that I was ill, and that I wanted rest. He seemed to have some difficulty in believing me. The poor old man is always on the watch. We must take every precaution, my dear Armand, for he will have me watched while I am there, and it isn't only the question of his taking a house for me, but he has my debts to pay, and unluckily I have plenty. Does all that suit you?" "Yes," I answered, trying to quiet the scruples which this way of living awoke in me from time to time. "We went all over the house, and we shall have everything perfect. The Duke is going to look after every single thing. Ah, my dear," she added, kissing me, "you're in luck. It's a millionaire who makes your bed for you." "And when shall you move into the house?" inquired Prudence. "As soon as possible." "Will you take your horses and carriage?" "I shall take the whole house, and you can look after my place while I am away." A week later Marguerite was settled in her country house, and I was installed at Point du Jour. Then began an existence which I shall have some difficulty in describing to you. At first Marguerite could not break entirely with her former habits, and, as the house was always en fête, all the women whom she knew came to see her. For a whole month there was not a day when Marguerite had not 8 or 10 people to meals. Prudence, on her side, brought down all the people she knew, and did the honours of the house as if the house belonged to her. The Duke's money paid for all that, as you may imagine, but from time to time Prudence came to me, asking for a note for 1,000 francs, professedly on behalf of Marguerite. You know I had won some money at gambling. I therefore immediately handed over to Prudence what she asked for Marguerite, and fearing lest she should require more than I possessed, I borrowed at Paris a sum equal to that which I had already borrowed and paid back. I was then once more in possession of some 10,000 francs, without reckoning my allowance. However, Marguerite's pleasure in seeing her friends was a little moderated when she saw the expense which that pleasure entailed, and especially the necessity she was sometimes in of asking me for money. The Duke, who had taken the house in order that Marguerite might rest there, no longer visited it, fearing to find himself in the midst of a large and merry company, by whom he did not wish to be seen. This came about through his having arrived to dine tête-à-tête with Marguerite, and having fallen upon a party of 15, who were still at lunch at an hour when he was prepared to sit down to dinner. He had unsuspectingly opened the dining-room door, and had been greeted by a burst of laughter, and had had to retire precipitately before the impertinent mirth of the women who assembled there. Marguerite rose from table, and joined the Duke in the next room, where she tried, as far as possible, to induce him to forget the incident, but the old man, wounded in his dignity, bore her a grudge for it, and could not forgive her. He said to her, somewhat cruelly, that he was tired of paying for the follies of a woman who could not even have him treated with respect under his own roof, and he went away in great indignation. Since that day he had never been heard of. In vain Marguerite dismissed her guests, changed her way of life. The Duke was not to be heard of. I was the gainer in so far that my mistress now belonged to me more completely, and my dream was at length realized. Marguerite could not be without me. Not caring what the result might be, she publicly proclaimed our liaison, and I had come to live entirely at her house. The servants addressed me officially as their master. Prudence had strictly sermonized Marguerite in regard to her new manner of life, but she had replied that she loved me, that she could not live without me, and that, happen what might, she would not sacrifice the pleasure of having me constantly with her, adding that those who were not satisfied with this arrangement were free to stay away. So much I had heard one day when Prudence had said to Marguerite that she had something very important to tell her, and I had listened at the door of the room into which they had shut themselves. Not long after, Prudence returned again. I was at the other end of the garden when she arrived, and she did not see me. I had no doubt, from the way in which Marguerite came to meet her, that another similar conversation was going to take place, and I was anxious to hear what it was about. The two women shut themselves into a boudoir, and I put myself within hearing. "Well?" said Marguerite. "Well, I have seen the Duke." "What did he say?" "That he would gladly forgive you in regard to the scene which took place, but that he has learned that you are publicly living with Monsieur Armand Duval, and that he will never forgive that. "Let Marguerite leave the young man," he said to me, "and, as in the past, I will give her all that she requires. If not, let her ask nothing more from me." "And you replied?" "That I would report his decision to you, and I promised him that I would bring you into a more reasonable frame of mind. Only think, my dear child, of the position that you are losing, and that Armand can never give you. He loves you with all his soul, but he has no fortune capable of supplying your needs, and he will be bound to leave you one day, when it will be too late, and when the Duke will refuse to do any more for you. Would you like me to speak to Armand?" Marguerite seemed to be thinking, for she answered nothing. My heart beat violently while I waited for her reply. "No," she answered, "I will not leave Armand, and I will not conceal the fact that I am living with him. It is folly, no doubt, but I love him. What would you have me do? And then, now that he has got accustomed to be always with me, he would suffer too cruelly if he had to leave me so much as an hour a day. Besides, I have not such a long time to live that I need make myself miserable in order to please an old man whose very sight makes me feel old. Let him keep his money. I will do without it." "But what will you do?" "I don't in the least know." Prudence was no doubt going to make some reply, but I entered suddenly and flung myself at Marguerite's feet, covering her hands with tears in my joy at being thus loved. "My life is yours, Marguerite. You need this man no longer. Am I not here? Shall I ever leave you, and can I ever repay you for the happiness that you give me? No more barriers, my Marguerite. We love. What matters all the rest?" "Oh yes, I love you, my Armand," she murmured, putting her 2 arms around my neck. "I love you as I never thought I should ever love. We will be happy. We will live quietly, and I will say good-bye forever to the life for which I now blush. You won't ever reproach me for the past. Tell me." Tears choked my voice. I could only reply by clasping Marguerite to my heart. "Well," said she, turning to Prudence, and speaking in a broken voice, "you can report this scene to the Duke, and you can add that we have no longer need of him." From that day forth the Duke was never referred to. Marguerite was no longer the same woman that I had known. She avoided everything that might recall to me the life which she had been leading when I first met her. Never did wife or sister surround husband or brother with such loving care as she had for me. Her nature was morbidly open to all impressions and accessible to all sentiments. She had broken equally with her friends and with her ways, with her words and with her extravagances. Anyone who had seen us leaving the house to go on the river in the charming little boat which I had bought would never have believed that the woman dressed in white, wearing a straw hat, and carrying on her arm a little silk pelisse to protect against the damp of the river, was that Marguerite Gautier who, only 4 months ago, had been the talk of the town for the luxury and scandal of her existence. Alas, we made haste to be happy, as if we knew that we were not to be happy long. For 2 months we had not even been to Paris. No one came to see us, except Prudence and Julie Duprat, of whom I have spoken to you, and of whom Marguerite was afterward to give the touching narrative that I have there. I passed whole days at the feet of my mistress. We opened the windows upon the garden, and, as we watched the summer ripening in its flowers and under the shadow of its trees, we breathed together that true life which neither Marguerite nor I had ever known before. Her delight in the smallest things was like that of a child. There were days when she ran in the garden, like a child of 10, after a butterfly or a dragonfly. This courtesan, who had cost more money in bouquets than would have kept a whole family in comfort, would sometimes sit on the grass for an hour, examining the simple flower whose name she bore. It was at this time that she read Manon Lescaut over and over again. I found her several times making notes in the book, and she always declared that when a woman loves, she cannot do as Manon did. The Duke wrote to her 2 or 3 times. She recognized the writing, and gave me the letters without reading them. Sometimes the terms of these letters brought tears to my eyes. He had imagined that by closing his purse to Marguerite he would bring her back to him. But when he had perceived the uselessness of these means, he could hold out no longer, and wrote and asked that he might see her again, as before, no matter on what conditions. I read these urgent and repeated letters, and tore them in pieces, without telling Marguerite what they contained, and without advising her to see the old man again, though I was half inclined to, so much did I pity him. But I was afraid lest, if I so advised her, she should think that I wished the Duke not merely to come and see her again, but to take over the expenses of the house. I feared, above all, that she might think me capable of shirking the responsibilities of every consequence to which her love for me might lead her. It thus came about that the Duke, receiving no reply, ceased to write, and that Marguerite and I continued to live together without giving a thought to the future. End of chapter 17.
Of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shane Nolan. Camille by Alexandre Dumas Fils. Translated by Edmund Goss. Chapter 18. It would be difficult to give you all the details of our new life. It was made up of a series of little childish events, charming for us but insignificant to anyone else. You know what it is to be in love with a woman. You know how it cuts short the days, and with what loving listlessness one drifts into the morrow. You know that forgetfulness of everything which comes of a violent, confident, reciprocated love. Every being who is not the beloved one seems a useless being in creation. One regrets having cast scraps of one's heart to other women, and one cannot believe in the possibility of ever pressing another hand than that which one holds between one's hands. The mind admits neither work nor remembrance, nothing, in short, which can distract it from the one thought in which it is ceaselessly absorbed. Every day one discovers in one's mistress a new charm and unknown delights. Existence itself is but the unceasing accomplishment of an unchanging desire. The soul is but the vestal charged to feed the sacred fire of love. We often went at night time to sit in the little wood above the house. There we listened to the cheerful harmonies of evening, both of us thinking of the coming hours which should leave us to one another till the dawn of day. At other times we did not get up all day. We did not even let the sunlight into our room. The curtains were hermetically closed, and for a moment the external world did not exist for us. Nanen alone had the right to open our door, but only to bring in our meals, and even these we took without getting up, interrupting them with laughter and gaiety. To that succeeded a brief sleep, for disappearing into the depths of our love we were like two divers who only come to the surface to take breath. Nevertheless, I surprised moments of sadness, even tears, in Marguerite. I asked her the cause of her trouble, and she answered, "Our love is not like other loves, my Armand. You love me as if I never belonged to another, and I tremble lest later on, repenting of your love and accusing me of my past, you should let me fall back into that life from which you have taken me. I think that now I have tasted of another life, I should die if I went back to the old one. Tell me that you will never leave me." "I swear it." At these words she looked at me as if to read in my eyes whether my oath was sincere, then flung herself into my arms, and hiding her head in my bosom, said to me, "You know you don't know how much I love you." One evening, seated on the balcony outside the window, we looked at the moon, which seemed to rise with difficulty out of its bed of clouds, and we listened to the wind violently rustling the trees. We held each other's hands, and for a whole quarter of an hour we had not spoken, when Marguerite said to me, "Winter is at hand. Would you like for us to go abroad? Where? To Italy. You're tired of here? I'm afraid of the winter. I'm particularly afraid of your return to Paris. Why? Oh, for many reasons. She went on abruptly without giving me her reasons for fears. Will you go abroad? I will sell all that I have. We will go and live there, and there will be nothing left of what I was. No one will know who I am. Will you? By all means. If you like, Marguerite, let us travel, I said. But where is the necessity of selling things which you will be glad of when we return? I have not large enough fortune to accept such a sacrifice, but I have enough for us to be able to travel splendidly for 5 or 6 months, if that will amuse you the least in the world. After all, no, she said, leaving the window and going to sit down on the sofa at the other end of the room. Why should we spend money abroad? I cost you enough already here. You reproach me, Marguerite. It isn't generous. Ah, forgive me, my friend, she said, giving me her hand. This thunder weather gets on my nerves. I do not say what I intend to say. And after embracing me, she fell into a long reverie. Scenes of this kind often took place, and though I could not discover their cause, I could not fail to see in Marguerite signs of disquietude in regard to the future. She could not doubt my love, which increased day by day, and yet I often found her sad without being able to get any explanation of the reason, except some physical cause, fearing that so monotonous a life was beginning to weary her. I proposed returning to Paris, but she always refused, assuring me that she would not be so happy anywhere as in the country. Prudence now came but rarely, but she often wrote letters which I never asked to see. Though every time they came, they seemed to preoccupy Marguerite deeply. I did not know what to think. One day Marguerite was in her room. I entered. She was writing. To whom are you writing? I asked. To Prudence. Do you want to see what I am writing? I had a horror of anything that might look like suspicion, and I answered that I had no desire to know what she was writing, and yet I was certain that letter would have explained to me the cause of her sadness. Next day the weather was splendid. Marguerite proposed to me to take the boat and go as far as the island of Croissy. She seemed very cheerful when we got back. It was 5 o'clock. Madame de Verneuil has been here, said Nanine as she saw us enter. She is gone again? Asked Marguerite. Yes, madame. In the carriage. She said it was arranged. Quite right, said Marguerite sharply. Serve the dinner. 2 days afterward there came a letter from Prudence, and for a fortnight Marguerite seemed to have got rid of her mysterious gloom, for which she constantly asked my forgiveness, now that it no longer existed. Still, the carriage did not return. How is it that Prudence did not send you back your carriage? I asked one day. One of the horses is ill, and there are some repairs to be done. It is better to have that done while we are here and don't need a carriage than to wait till we get back to Paris. Prudence came 2 days afterward and confirmed what Marguerite had said. The 2 women went for a walk in the garden, and when I joined them they changed the conversation. That night she was going. Prudence complained of the cold and asked Marguerite to lend her a shawl. So a month passed, and all the time Marguerite was more joyous and more affectionate than she's ever had been. Nevertheless, the carriage did not return. The shawl had not been sent back, and I began to be anxious in spite of myself. And as I knew in which drawer Marguerite put Prudence's letters, I took advantage of a moment when she was at the other end of the garden, went to the drawer, and tried to open it. In vain, for it was locked. When I opened the drawer in which the trinkets and diamonds were usually kept, these opened without resistance, but the jewel cases had disappeared, along with their contents, no doubt. A sharp fear penetrated my heart. I might indeed ask Marguerite for the truth in regard to these disappearances, but it was certain that she would not confess it. My good Marguerite, I said to her, I am going to ask your permission to go to Paris. They do not know my address, and I expect there are letters there for my father waiting for me. I have no doubt he is concerned I ought to answer him." "Go, my friend," she said, "but be back early." I went straight to Prudence. "Come," said I, without beating around the bush. "Tell me frankly, where are Marguerite's horses?" "Sold." "The shawl?" "Sold." "The diamonds?" "Pawned." "And who has sold and pawned them?" "Why did you not tell me?" "Because Marguerite made me promise not to." "And why did you not ask me for money?" "Because she wouldn't let me." "And where has this money gone?" "In payments." "Is she much in debt?" 30,000 francs or thereabout. "Ah, my dear fellow, didn't I tell you? You wouldn't believe me. Now you are convinced. The upholsterer whom the Duke had agreed to settle with was shown out of the house when he presented himself, and the Duke wrote next day to say that he would answer for nothing in regard to Mademoiselle Gautier. This man wanted his money. He was given part payment out of the few thousand francs that I got from you. Then some kind of souls warned him that his debtor had been abandoned by the Duke, and was living with a penniless young man. The other creditors were told the same thing. They asked for their money, and seized some of the goods. Marguerite wanted to sell everything, but it was too late, and besides, I should have opposed it. But it was necessary to pay, and in order not to ask you for money, she sold her horses and her shawls, and pawned her jewels. Would you like to see the receipts and the pawn tickets?" And Prudence opened the drawer and showed me the papers. "Ah, you think," she continued with the insistence of a woman who can say, "I was right after all." "Ah, you think it is enough to be in love and to go into the country and lead a dreamy pastoral life. No, my friend, no. By the side of that ideal life there is a material life, and the purest resolutions are held to earth by threads which seem slight enough, but which are of iron not easily broken. If Marguerite had not been unfaithful to you 20 times, it is because she has an exceptional nature. It is not my fault for not advising her too, for I couldn't bear to see the poor girl stripping herself of everything. She wouldn't. She replied that she loved you, and she wouldn't be unfaithful to you for anything in the world." "All that is very pretty, very poetical, but one can pay one's creditors in that coin, and now she can't free herself from debt unless she can raise 30,000 francs. "All right, I will provide that amount." "You will borrow it?" "Good heavens! Why, yes." "A fine thing that will be to do. You will fall out with your father, cripple your resources, and one doesn't find 30,000 francs from one day to another. Believe me, my dear Armand, I know women better than you do. Do not commit this folly. You will be sorry for it one day. Be reasonable. I don't advise you to leave Marguerite, but live with her as you did at the beginning. Let her find the means to get out of this difficulty. The Duke will come back in a little while. The Comte d'In, if she would take him, he told me yesterday even, would pay all her debts and give her 4,000 or 5,000 francs a month. He has 200,000 a year. It would be a position for her, while you will certainly be obliged to leave her. Don't wait until you're ruined, especially as the Comte d'In is a fool, and nothing would prevent your still being Marguerite's lover. She would cry a little at the beginning, but she would come to accustom herself to it, and you would thank me one day for what I have done. Imagine that Marguerite is married, and deceive the husband, that is all. I have already told you all this once, only at that time it was merely advice, and now it is almost a necessity. What Prudence said was cruelly true. See, this is how it is," she went on, putting away the paper she had just shown me. "Women like Marguerite always foresee that someone will love them, never that they will love. Otherwise, they would put aside money, and at 30 they could afford the luxury of having a lover for nothing. If I had only known once what I know now, in short, say nothing to Marguerite, and bring her back to Paris. You have lived with her alone for 4 or 5 months. That is quite enough. Shut your eyes now. That is all that anyone asks of you. At the end of a fortnight, she will take the Comte de Inn, and she will save up during the winter, and next summer you will begin all over. That is how things are done, my dear fellow. And Prudence appeared to be enchanted with her advice, which I refused indignantly. Not only my love and my dignity would not let me act thus, but I was certain that, feeling as she did now, Marguerite would rather die than accept another lover. Enough joking, I said to Prudence. Tell me exactly how much Marguerite is in need of. I have told you 30,000 francs. And when does she require the sum? Before the end of 2 months. She shall have it. Prudence shrugged her shoulders. I will give it to you, I continued, but you must swear to me that you will not tell Marguerite that I have given it to you. Don't be afraid. And if she sends you anything else to sell or pawn, let me know. Oh, there is no danger. She has nothing left. I went straight to my own house to see if there were any letters from my father. There were 4. End of chapter 18. Recording by Shane Nolan.
Of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Bologna Times. Camille by Alexandre Dumas, Ville. Translated by Edmond Gosse. Chapter 19. In his first 3 letters, my father inquired the cause of my silence. In the last he allowed me to see that he had heard of my change of life, and informed me that he was about to come and see me. I have always had a great respect and a sincere affection for my father. I replied that I had been travelling for a short time, and begged him to let me know beforehand what day he would arrive, so that I could be there to meet him. I gave my servant my address in the country, telling him to bring me the first letter that came with the postmark of Camille. Then I returned to Bougival. Marguerite was waiting for me at the garden gate. She looked at me anxiously. Throwing her arms round my neck, she said to me, "Have you seen Prudence?" "No." "You were a long time in Paris." "I found letters from my father, to which I had to reply." A few minutes afterward, Nanine entered, all out of breath. Marguerite rose and talked with her in whispers. When Nanine had gone out, Marguerite sat down by me again, and said, taking my hand, "Why did you deceive me? You went to see Prudence." "Who told you?" "Nanine." "And how did she know?" "She followed you." "You told her to follow me?" "Yes. I thought that you must have had a very strong motive for going to Paris, after not leaving me for 4 months. I was afraid that something might happen to you, or that you were, perhaps, going to see another woman." "Child!" "Now I am relieved. I know what you have done, but I don't yet know what you have been told." I showed Marguerite my father's letters. "That is not what I am asking you about. What I want to know is why you went to see Prudence." "To see her." "That's a lie, my friend." "Well, I went to ask her if the horse was any better, and if she wanted your shawl and your jewels any longer." Marguerite blushed, but did not answer. "And," I continued, "I learned what you had done with your horses, shawls, and jewels." "And are you vexed?" "I am vexed that it never occurred to you to ask me for what you were in want of." In a liaison like ours, if the woman has any sense of dignity at all, she ought to make every possible sacrifice rather than to ask her lover for money, and so give a venal character to her love. You love me, I am sure, but you do not know on how slight a thread depends the love one has for a woman like me. Who knows? Perhaps some day, when you were bored or worried, you would fancy you saw a carefully concerted plan in our liaison. Prudence is a chatterbox. What need had I of the horses? It was an economy to sell them. I don't use them, and I don't spend anything on their keep. If you love me, I ask nothing more, and you will love me just as much without horses, or shawls, or diamonds. All that was said so naturally that the tears came to my eyes as I listened. "But, my good Marguerite," I replied, pressing her hands lovingly, "you knew that one day I should discover the sacrifice you had made, and that the moment I discovered it I should allow it no longer." "But why?" "Because, my dear child, I cannot allow your affection for me to deprive you of even a trinket. I, too, should not like you to be able, in a moment when you were bored or worried, to think that if you were living with somebody else those moments would not exist, and to repent, if only for a minute, of living with me. In a few days your horses, your diamonds, and your shawls shall be returned to you. They are as necessary to you as air is to life, and it may be absurd, but I like you better showy than simple." "Then you no longer love me?" "Foolish creature! If you loved me, you would let me love you my own way. On the contrary, you persist in only seeing in me a woman to whom luxury is indispensable, and whom you think you are always obliged to pay. You are ashamed to accept the proof of my love. In spite of yourself, you think of leaving me some day, and you want to put your disinterestedness beyond risk of suspicion. You are right, my friend, but I had better hopes." And Marguerite made a motion to rise. I held her, and said to her, "I want you to be happy, and to have nothing to reproach me for. That is all. And we are going to be separated." "Why, Marguerite, who can separate us?" I cried. "You, who will not let me take you on your own level, but insist on taking me on mine. You, who wish me to keep the luxury in the midst of which I have lived, and so keep the moral distance which separates us. You, who do not believe that my affection is sufficiently disinterested to share with me what you have, though we could live happily enough on it together, and would rather ruin yourself, because you are still bound by a foolish prejudice. Do you really think that I can compare a carriage and diamonds with your love? Do you think that my real happiness lies in the trifles that mean so much when one has nothing to love, but which become trifling indeed when one has? You will pay my debts, realize your estate, and then keep me? How long will that last? 2 or 3 months, and then it will be too late to live the life I propose, for then you will have to take everything from me, and that is what a man of honor cannot do, while now you have 8 or 10,000 francs a year on which we should be able to live. I will sell the rest of what I do not want, and with this alone I will make 2,000 francs a year. We will take a nice little flat in which we can both live. In the summer we will go into the country, not to a house like this, but to a house just big enough for 2 people. You are independent, I am free. We are young. In heaven's name, Armand, do not drive me back into the life I had to lead once." I could not answer. Tears of gratitude and love filled my eyes. I flung myself into Marguerite's arms. "I wanted," she continued, "to arrange everything without telling you, pay all my debts, and take a new flat. In October we should have been back in Paris, and all would have come out. But since Prudence has told you all, you will have to agree beforehand, instead of agreeing afterward. Do you love me enough for that?" It was impossible to resist such devotion. I kissed her hands ardently, and said, "I will do whatever you wish." It was agreed that we should do as she had planned. Thereupon she went wild with delight, danced, sang, amused herself with calling up pictures of her new flat in all its simplicity, and began to consult me as to its position and arrangement. I saw how happy and proud she was of this resolution, which seemed as if it would bring us into closer and closer relationship, and I resolved to do my own share. In an instant I decided the whole course of my life. I put my affairs in order, and made over to Marguerite the income which had come to me from my mother, and which seemed little enough in return for the sacrifice which I was accepting. There remained the 5,000 francs a year from my father, and whatever happened, I had always enough to live on. I did not tell Marguerite what I had done, certain as I was that she would refuse the gift. This income came from a mortgage of 60,000 francs on a house that I had never even seen. All that I knew was that every 3 months my father's solicitor, an old friend of the family, handed over to me 750 francs in return for my receipt. The day when Marguerite and I came to Paris to look for a flat, I went to the solicitor and asked him what had to be done in order to make over this income to another person. The good man imagined I was ruined, and questioned me as to the cause of my decision. As I knew that I should be obliged, sooner or later, to say in whose favour I made this transfer, I thought it best to tell him the truth at once. He made none of the objections that his position as friend and solicitor authorized him to make, and assured that he would arrange the whole affair in the best way possible. Naturally, I begged him to employ the greatest discretion in regard to my father, and on leaving him I rejoined Marguerite, who was waiting for me at Julie Duprat's, where she had gone in preference to going to listen to the moralizings of Prudence. We began to look out for flats. All those that we saw seemed to Marguerite too dear, and to me too simple. However, we finally found, in one of the quietest parts of Paris, a little house, isolated from the main part of the building. Behind this little house was a charming garden, surrounded by walls high enough to screen us from our neighbours, and low enough not to shut off our own view. It was better than our expectations. While I went to give notice at my own flat, Marguerite went to see a business agent, who, she told me, had already done for one of her friends exactly what she wanted him to do for her. She came on to the Rue de Provence in a state of great delight. The man had promised to pay all her debts, to give her a receipt for the amount, and to hand over to her 20,000 francs in return for the whole of her furniture. You have seen by the amount taken at the sale that this honest man would have gained 30,000 francs out of his client. We went back joyously to Bougival, talking over our projects for the future, which, thanks to our heedlessness, and especially to our love, we saw in the rosiest light. A week later, as we were having lunch, Nanine came to tell us that my servant was asking for me. "Let him come in," I said. "Sir," said he, "your father has arrived in Paris, and begs you to return at once to your rooms, where he is waiting for you." This piece of news was the most natural thing in the world, yet, as we heard it, Marguerite and I looked at one another. We foresaw trouble. Before she had spoken a word, I replied to her thought, and taking her hand, I said, "Fear nothing." "Come back as soon as possible," whispered Marguerite, embracing me. "I will wait for you at the window." I sent on Joseph to tell my father that I was on my way. 2 hours later I was at the Rue de Provence. Chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bologna Times. Camille by Alexandre Dumas Fil. Translation by Edmund Goss. Chapter 21. My father was seated in my room in his dressing room. He was writing, and I saw at once, by the way in which he raised his eyes to me when I came in, that there was going to be a serious discussion. I went up to him, all the same, as if I had seen nothing in his face, embraced him, and said, "When did you come, father?" "Last night." "Did you come straight here, as usual?" "Yes." "I am very sorry not to have been here to receive you." I expected that the sermon which my father's cold face threatened would begin at once, but he said nothing, sealed the letter which he had just written, and gave it to Joseph to post. When we were alone, my father rose, and leaning against the mantelpiece, said to me, "My dear Armand, we have serious matters to discuss." "I am listening, father." "You promise me to be frank?" "Am I not accustomed to be so?" "Is it not true that you are living with a woman called Marguerite Gautier?" "Yes." "Do you know what this woman was?" "A kept woman." "And it is for her that you have forgotten to come and see your sister and me this year?" "Yes, father, I admit it." "You are very much in love with this woman?" "You see it, father, since she has made me fail in duty toward you, for which I humbly ask your forgiveness today." My father, no doubt, was not expecting such categorical answers, for he seemed to reflect a moment, and then said to me, "You have of course realized that you cannot always live like that." "I fear so, father, but I have not realized it." "But you must realize," continued my father, in a drier tone, "that I, at all events, should not permit it." I have said to myself that as long as I did nothing contrary to the respect which I owe to the traditional probity of the family I could live as I am living, and this has reassured me somewhat in regard to the fears I have had. Passions are formidable enemies to sentiment. I was prepared for every struggle, even with my father, in order that I might keep Marguerite. "Then the moment is come when you must live otherwise." "Why, father?" "Because you are doing things which outrage the respect that you imagine you have for your family." "I don't follow your meaning." "I will explain it to you. Have a mistress, if you will. Pay her as a man of honor is bound to pay the woman whom he keeps, by all means. But that you should come to forget the most sacred things for her, that you should let the report of your scandalous life reach my quiet countryside, and set a blot on the honorable name that I have given you, it cannot, it shall not be." "Permit me to tell you, father, that those who have given you information about me have been ill informed. I am the lover of Mademoiselle Gautier. I live with her. It is the most natural thing in the world. I do not give Mademoiselle Gautier the name you have given me. I spend on her account what my means allow me to spend. I have no debts, and in short, I am not in a position which authorizes a father to say to his son what you have just said to me." "A father is always authorized to rescue his son out of evil paths. You have not done any harm yet, but you will do it." "Father!" "Sir, I know more of life than you do. There are no entirely pure sentiments, except in perfectly chaste women. Every Manon can have her own Des Grieux, and times are changed. It would be useless for the world to grow older if it did not correct its ways. You will leave your mistress." "I am very sorry to disobey you, father, but it's impossible." "I will compel you to do so." "Unfortunately, father, there no longer exists a Sainte Marguerite to which courtesans can be sent, and even if there were, I would follow Mademoiselle Gautier if you succeeded in having her sent there. What would you have? Perhaps I'm in the wrong, but I can only be happy as I am the lover of this woman." "Come, Armand, open your eyes. Recognize that it is your father who speaks to you, your father who has always loved you, and who only desires your happiness. Is it honorable for you to live like husband and wife with a woman whom everybody has had? What does it matter, father, if no one will any more? What does it matter if this woman loves me, if her whole life is changed through the love which she has for me, and the love which I have for her? What does it matter if she has become a different woman?" "Do you think, then, sir, that the mission of a man of honor is to go about converting lost women? Do you think that God has given such a grotesque aim to life, and that the heart should have any room for enthusiasm of that kind? What will be the end of this marvelous cure? And what will you think of what you are saying to day by the time you are 40? You will laugh at this love of yours, if you can still laugh, and it has not left too serious a trace in your past. What would you be now if your father had had your ideas and had given up his life to every impulse of this kind, instead of rooting himself firmly in convictions of honor and steadfastness? Think it over, Armand, and do not talk any more such absurdities. Come, leave this woman. Your father entreats you." I answered nothing. "Armand," continued my father, "in the name of your sainted mother, abandon this life, which you will forget more easily than you think. You are tied to it by an impossible theory. You are 24. Think of the future. You cannot always love this woman, who also cannot always love you. You both exaggerate your love. You put an end to your whole career. One step further, and you will no longer be able to leave the path you have chosen, and you will suffer all your life for what you have done in your youth. Leave Paris. Come and stay for a month or two with your sister and me. Rest in our quiet family affection will soon heal you of this fever, for it is nothing else. Meanwhile, your mistress will console herself. She will take another lover, and when you see what it is for which you have all but broken with your father, and all but lost his love, you will tell me that I have done well to come and seek you out, and you will thank me for it. Come, you will go with me, Armand, will you not?" I felt that my father would be right if it had been any other woman, but I was convinced that he was wrong with regard to Marguerite. Nevertheless, the tone in which he said these last words was so kind, so appealing, that I dared not answer. "Well?" said he, in a trembling voice. "Well, father, I can promise nothing," I said at last. "What you ask of me is beyond my power. Believe me," I continued, seeing him make an impatient movement. "You exaggerate the effects of this liaison. Marguerite is a different kind of woman from what you think. This love, far from leading me astray, is capable, on the contrary, of setting me in the right direction. Love always makes a man better, no matter what woman inspires it. If you knew Marguerite, you would understand that I am in no danger. She is as noble as the noblest of women. There is as much disinterestedness in her as there is in cupidity in others. All of which does not prevent her from accepting the whole of your fortune. For the 60,000 francs which come to you from your mother, and which you are giving her, are, understand me well, your whole fortune." My father had probably kept this peroration and this threat for the last stroke. I was firmer before these threats than before his entreaties. "Who told you that I was handing this sum to her?" I asked. "My solicitor." "Could an honest man carry out such a procedure without warning me?" "Well, it is to prevent you from ruining yourself for a prostitute that I am now in Paris. Your mother, when she died, left you enough to live on respectably, and not to squander on your mistresses." "I swear to you, father, that Marguerite knew nothing of this transfer." "Why, then, do you make it?" "Because Marguerite, the woman you calumniate and whom you wish me to abandon, is sacrificing all that she possesses in order to live with me." "And you accept this sacrifice? What sort of man are you, sir, to allow Mademoiselle Gautier to sacrifice anything for you? Come, enough of this. You will leave this woman. Just now I begged you. Now I command you. I will have no such scandalous doings in my family. Pack up your things and get ready to come with me." "Pardon me, father," I said, "but I shall not come." "And why?" "Because I am at an age when no one any longer obeys a command." My father turned pale at my answer. "Very well, sir," he said. "I know what remains to be done." He rang, and Joseph appeared. "Have my things taken to the Hotel de Paris," he said to my servant, and thereupon he went to his room and finished dressing. When he returned, I went up to him. "Promise me, father," I said, "that you will do nothing to give Marguerite pain." My father stopped, looked at me disdainfully, and contented himself with saying, "I believe you are mad." After this he went out, shutting the door violently after him. I went downstairs, took a cab, and returned to Bougival. Marguerite was waiting for me at the window. Chapter 21 of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bologna Times. Camille by Alexandre Dumas Ville. Translated by Edmund Goss. Chapter 21. "At last you have come," she said, throwing her arms round my neck. "But how pale you are!" I told her of the scene with my father. "My God, I was afraid of it," she said. "When Joseph came to tell you of your father's arrival, I trembled as if he had brought news of some misfortune. My poor friend, I am the cause of all your distress. You will be better off, perhaps, if you leave me and do not quarrel with your father on my account. He knows that you are sure to have a mistress, and he ought to be thankful that it is I, since I love you and do not want more of you than your position allows. Did you tell him how we arranged our future?" "Yes, that is what annoyed him the most, for he saw how much we really love one another." "What are we to do then?" "Hold together, my good Marguerite. Let the storm pass over." "Will it pass?" "It will have to." "But your father will not stop there." "What do you suppose he can do?" "How do I know? Everything that a father can do to make his son obey him. He will remind you of my past life, and will perhaps do me the honor of inventing some new story so that you may give me up." "You know that I love you." "Yes, but what I know too is that sooner or later you will have to obey your father, and perhaps you will end by believing him." "No, Marguerite, it is I who will make him believe me. Some of his friends have been telling him tales which have made him angry, but he is good and just. He will change his first impression, and then, after all, what does it matter to me?" "Do not say that, Armand. I would rather anything should happen than that you should quarrel with your family. Wait till after to day. and tomorrow go back to Paris. Your father, too, will have thought it over on his side, and perhaps you will both come to a better understanding. Do not go against his principles. Pretend to make some concessions to what he wants. Seem not to care so very much about me, and he will let things remain as they are. Hope, my friend, and be sure of one thing, that whatever happens, Marguerite will always be yours." "You swear it?" "Do I need to swear it? How sweet it is to let oneself be persuaded by the voice that one loves. Marguerite and I spent the whole day in talking over our projects for the future, as if we felt the need of realizing them as quickly as possible. At every moment we awaited some event, but the day passed without bringing us any new tidings. Next day I left at 10 o'clock, and reached the hotel about 12. My father had gone out. I went to my own rooms, hoping that he had perhaps gone there. No one had called. I went to the solicitor's. No one was there. I went back to the hotel and waited till 6. Monsieur Duval did not return, and I went back to Bougival. I found Marguerite not waiting for me, as she had been the day before, but sitting by the fire, which the weather still made necessary. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that I came close to her chair without her hearing me. When I put my lips to her forehead, she started, as if the kiss had suddenly awakened her. "You frightened me," she said. "And your father?" "I have not seen him. I do not know what it means. He was not at his hotel, nor anywhere where there was a chance of my finding him." "Well, you must try again tomorrow." "I am very much inclined to wait till he sends for me. I think I have done all that can be expected of me." "No, my friend, it is not enough. You must call on your father again, and you must call tomorrow." "Why tomorrow rather than any other day?" "Because," said Marguerite, and it seemed to me that she blushed slightly at this question, "because it will show that you are the more keen about it, and he will forgive us the sooner." For the remainder of the day Marguerite was sad and preoccupied. I had to repeat twice over everything I said to her to obtain an answer. She ascribed this preoccupation to her anxiety in regard to the events which had happened during the last 2 days. I spent the night in reassuring her, and she sent me away in the morning with an insistent disquietude that I could not explain to myself. Again my father was absent, but he had left this letter for me. "If you call again to-day, wait for me till 4. If I am not in by 4, come and dine with me to-morrow. I must see you." I waited till the hour he had named, but he did not appear. I returned to Bougival. The night before I had found Marguerite sad. That night I found her feverish and agitated. On seeing me, she flung her arms around my neck, but she cried for a long time in my arms. I questioned her as to this sudden distress, which alarmed me by its violence. She gave me no positive reason, but put me off with those evasions which a woman resorts to when she will not tell the truth. When she was a little calmed down, I told her the result of my visit, and I showed her my father's letter, from which, I said, we might augur well. At the sight of the letter, and on hearing my comment, her tears began to flow so copiously that I feared an attack of nerves, and, calling Nanine, I put her to bed, where she wept without a word, but held my hands and kissed them every moment. I asked Nanine if, during my absence, her mistress had received any letter or visit which could account for the state in which I found her, but Nanine replied that no one had called and nothing had been sent. Something, however, had occurred since the day before, something which troubled me the more because Marguerite concealed it from me. In the evening she seemed a little calmer, and, making me sit at the foot of the bed, she told me many times how much she loved me. She smiled at me, but with an effort, for in spite of herself her eyes were veiled with tears. I used every means to make her confess the real cause of her distress, but she persisted in giving me nothing but vague reasons, as I have told you. At last she fell asleep in my arms, but it was the sleep which tires rather than rests the body. From time to time she uttered a cry, started up, and, after assuring herself that I was beside her, made me swear that I would always love her. I could make nothing of these intermittent paroxysms of distress, which went on till morning. Then Marguerite fell into a kind of stupor. She had not slept for 2 nights. Her rest was of short duration, for toward 11 she awoke, and, seeing that I was up, she looked about her, crying. "Are you going already?" "No," said I, holding her hands, "but I wanted to let you sleep on. It is still early." "What time are you going to Paris?" "At 4." "So soon? But you will stay with me till then?" "Of course. Do I not always?" "I am so glad. Shall we have lunch?" she went on absent-mindedly. "If you like." "And then you will be nice to me till the very moment you go?" "Yes, and I will come back as soon as I can." "You will come back?" she said, looking at me with haggard eyes. "Naturally." "Oh, yes, you will come back tonight. I shall wait for you, as I always do, and you will love me and we shall be happy, as we have been ever since we have known each other." All these words were said in such a strained voice, they seemed to hide so persistent and so sorrowful a thought, that I trembled every moment lest Marguerite should become delirious. "Listen," I said, "you are ill. I cannot leave you like this. I will write and tell my father not to expect me." "No, no," she cried hastily, "don't do that. Your father will accuse me of hindering you again from going to see him when he wants to see you. No, no, you must go. You must. Besides, I am not ill. I am quite well. I had a bad dream and am not yet fully awake." From that moment Marguerite tried to seem more cheerful. There were no more tears. When the hour came for me to go, I embraced her and asked her if she would come with me as far as the train. I hoped that the walk would distract her and that the air would do her good. I wanted especially to be with her as long as possible. She agreed, put on her cloak, and took Nanine with her, so as not to return alone. 20 times I was on the point of not going, but the hope of a speedy return, and the fear of offending my father still more, sustained me, and I took my place in the train. "Till this evening," I said to Marguerite as I left her. She did not reply. Once again she had not replied to the same words, and the Comte de G., you will remember, had spent the night with her. But that time was so far away that it seemed to have been effaced from my memory, and if I had any fear, it was certainly not of Marguerite being unfaithful to me. Reaching Paris, I hastened off to see Prudence, intending to ask her to go and keep Marguerite company, in the hope that her mirth and liveliness would distract her. I entered without being announced, and found Prudence at her toilette. "Ah!" she said anxiously, "is Marguerite with you?" "No." "How is she?" "She is not well." "Is she not coming?" "Did you expect her?" Madame Duvernoy reddened, and replied with a certain constraint: "I only meant that since you are at Paris, is she not coming to join you?" "No." I looked at Prudence. She cast down her eyes, and I read in her face the fear of seeing my visit prolonged. "I even came to ask you, my dear Prudence, if you have nothing to do this evening, to go and see Marguerite. You will be company for her, and you can stay the night. I never saw her as she was to day, and I am afraid she is going to be ill." "I am dining in town," replied Prudence, "and I can't go and see Marguerite this evening. I will see her to morrow." I took leave of Mademoiselle Duvernoy, who seemed almost as preoccupied as Marguerite, and went on to my father's. His first glance seemed to study me attentively. He held out his hand. "Your 2 visits have given me pleasure, Armand," he said. "They make me hope that you have thought over things on your side as I have on mine." May I ask you, father, what was the result of your reflection?" "The result, my dear boy, is that I have exaggerated the importance of the reports that had been made to me, and that I have made up my mind to be less severe with you." "What are you saying, father?" I cried joyously. "I say, my dear child, that every young man must have his mistress, and that, from the fresh information I have had, I would rather see you the lover of Mademoiselle Gautier than of any one else." "My dear father, how happy you make me!" We talked in this manner for some moments, and then sat down to table. My father was charming all dinner time. I was in a hurry to get back to Bougival to tell Marguerite about this fortunate change, and I looked at the clock every moment. "You are watching the time," said my father, "and you are impatient to leave me. Oh, young people, how you always sacrifice sincere to doubtful affections!" "Do not say that, father. Marguerite loves me, I am sure of it." My father did not answer. He seemed to say neither yes nor no. He was very insistent that I should spend the whole evening with him, and not go till the morning. But Marguerite had not been well when I left her. I told him of it, and begged his permission to go back to her early, promising to come home again on the morrow. The weather was fine. He walked with me as far as the station. Never had I been so happy. The future appeared as I had long desired to see it. I had never loved my father as I loved him at that moment. Just as I was leaving him, he once more begged me to stay. I refused. "You are really very much in love with her?" he asked. "Madly." "Go, then." And he passed his hand across his forehead, as if to chase a thought, then opened his mouth as if to say something, but he only pressed my hand, and left me hurriedly, saying, "Till tomorrow, then." Chapter 21